Record now.
Okay, so we're recording right now. There's a different setup here. Well, actually, it's not a different setup. There's a specific setup that we're going to do today. I got so many requests from people of varying degrees of understanding and anger for me to shut up and let Devon speak. One person had said, I really want to know what Devon has to say, but you talk the entire time. And then someone else yelled at me and said, let Devon speak. And then another person accused me of mansplaining, which I just have to, let me mansplain to explain I'm not mansplaining. The reality is I could be having a conversation with a sentient penis. It wouldn't matter. I would dominate the conversation and not shut up. It's called a personality flaw. I've got one. Everyone's got one. This just happens to be mine. So in order to manage my personality flaw, which is I can't shut up, I'm going to interview Devon today. I'm literally going to sit on my hands. I'm going to hit the mute button. That's how serious I'm about this. Every time Devon speaks, I'm going to hit the mute button so I can't even try to interject words into the conversation. And that's what we're going to run today. This is the Devon Peterson domination interview, right? This is all Devon. So all the fans out there that request to hear what Devon had to say, you're going to get what you wanted. Is that fair, Devon?
That's fair.
It's fair to the public. So the questions, I'm going to basically be Oprah. I'm going to be Phil Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael. I'm going to interview you and ask you a series of questions, and you're going to expand upon the information. So the questions the public really wanted the people really wanted to hear you speak. What they almost overwhelmingly, they were all really, really interested in was when you were talking about this idea of tweaking the diet that somebody already has. So some people need massive changes in their diet, and that's fine. But what you've said to me in the past is your most success comes from not drastically changing somebody's diet, but kind of seeing how they normally eat in their schedule and tweaking little things. And one of the things you talked about was protein, right? So that's really what I want to get into today, is not just make this broad discussion of, well, how does Devon tweak someone's diet that already exists to make it more supportive of long-term weight loss? But specifically the protein, I was very interested in how you tweak that. So at this point, I'm going to say the first thing is, what do you have to say about that concept of not massively changing somebody's diet, but working within the diet they already have? And give us some ideas of some tweaks that you make. I'm hitting mute right now and go.
Okay. So for the protein, I mean, that's really going to be what keeps someone full, especially in a calorie deficit. So when you are in a calorie deficit, which is necessary for weight loss, when you're in that for a period of time, or even to sustain that for a period of time, you're going to need a decent amount of protein to actually keep you full. So that's one of the main reasons why it's so important. And then the other main reason is that it helps to keep muscle mass as you diet down, so you don't lose muscle mass, because the muscle loss is, or really like the muscle preservation is important for when the scale goes down, you're ensuring that you're losing mostly body fat and not just fat and muscle.
The public might ask then, Devon, why is muscle so important to maintain?
It's metabolically active tissue. So that's really, most people don't want to just lose weight and just become a smaller, flabbier version of themselves. So just in terms of aesthetics alone, that's a big part of it, but there's also other correlations with the amount of muscle mass, especially leg muscle. I don't know the exact correlation with lifespan, like the more lower body muscle mass that you have, of course, correlated with a longer lifespan. And then also another thing with muscle is it allows you to eat more. Like if you are like if you're eating a certain amount of calories, and like it allows you to basically keep a higher food intake because you have more muscle mass and have less body fat, if that makes sense.
Oh, no, it makes perfect sense. So what I'm putting my notes in here so far is protein's important because it helps you keep you full, because you have to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight, and it helps you maintain muscle mass. Why is muscle mass maintenance important? Helps maintain metabolic rate. Aesthetically, it looks good. It helps you maintain function, meaning you can actually do things with your physical skinny body. And if you have more muscle, you can eat more. Is that fair summation of the first point?
Yeah.
Okay. So now the second question, I guess, that would lead into is, if protein is so important and you're in this calorie deficit, what are some of your favorite tactics, tricks, or recipes even to help someone get more protein in the diet, especially considering the fact they're in a calorie deficit?
Yeah, so with that, I think just coming up with a list of sources of protein that you know that you like. And so let's say chicken breasts, a combination of eggs and egg whites, low-fat cottage cheese, lean beef. So just coming up with those so that you're not just sitting there thinking like, what should I eat? You know, you go to your list and you have these go-to sources that you know you already like. And then all you have to do is figure out what portions you need in order to meet your protein needs for the day or for that meal.
So two huge things you hit on that. Number one, you said the word like. And my question would be, not my question, but I know what people are going to wonder is, why is liking the protein sources you choose in terms, I don't mean like in terms of like you're a fan of egg whites, but why is liking flavor, taste so important? And why is, I can't remember my own handwriting. This is how hard it is for me not to speak. Will you get on that and I'll figure this out. Why is liking the source of protein so important?
I mean, it's really to make your diet more sustainable. Like if you are able to eat in a calorie deficit with enough protein in a way that you enjoy, so that you can make it just part of your life, you just make it what you do. Like there's not like this like dread around it. It just makes it actually doable for a long period of time. Like you always say, we don't have a weight loss problem, we have a weight loss maintenance problem. So so like with
Pat
that,
myself on the back, sorry.
yeah. So with that, if you can develop an eating strategy that you actually like, that weight loss maintenance becomes much easier. You're still muted.
Sorry, this whole not talking thing is new to me, sorry. Why is not wondering so important? So one of the things you said is when someone goes to eat their food and they're not wondering, well, what am I going to have today? Why is knowing and not wondering so important when someone's on a weight loss diet? Why is knowing what you're going to do so important? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, really with anything you want to do consistently, I think just minimizing or eliminating decision fatigue is going to be a huge part of that, especially like around food. If you just wait until you're hungry, until you decide what and how much you're going to eat, it's chances are you're just going to grab the first thing in the fridge that you find and eat it. So if you can already have that planned out ahead of time, you already know what you're eating, what the portion you need is, ideally having it already portioned out ahead of time too, just to basically like eliminate decision fatigue. Like you don't want to be like the less you have to think about it and the less you have to make these choices, the easier that consistency is going to be.
Tell me more about this decision fatigue. I like this phrase. Can you explain to people in an exercise standpoint? I don't mean like buying and remodeling a home decision fatigue, although that's a valid scientific thing. Can you explain to people what decision fatigue is and why it's important relative to being in a weight loss diet?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just like over the course of the day, like at the beginning of the day, your willpower, if you want to call it that, is highest. And then as the day goes on, it gets less and less and less. And you'll see that with people who are dieting, like they'll eat like egg whites and like an egg white omelet for breakfast. They'll have like chicken and chicken breast on a salad for lunch. And then they get home and then it's like, it just all goes downhill from there. And that could also, there are other factors that play into that. Like if you're not busy at work, you're more relaxed at the end of the day. So you like your inhibitions are lower and you just have more downtime. But ultimately like the decision fatigue, like you want to avoid putting yourself into so many decisions where you have to decide like this versus that. And especially when you're tired, you're hungry, you're trying to develop these new habits that are already challenging to begin with. Like if you can remove or minimize that obstacle of having to decide, it just can be a huge benefit if you just have to think about it less.
Let's hit on that a little bit. Two things you said, home and decisions. So let's just pretend you're Dorothy in the land of Oz, right? And you're not home. In fact, there's no place like home, but you're not home. And you've got too many decisions to make, and the worst place would be a fast food restaurant. So I'm going to give you two fast food restaurants that I know we have around here. I don't know about places around here, but places like Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, McDonald's. Can you give us some of your insights as to ways and let's keep this narrow, that people can increase their protein intake in those environments without blowing their calorie amount? For example, you could get a double quarter pounder at McDonald's and get a lot of protein. You're also going to get 800-900 calories, which is half of what most people are going to wind up eating in a calorie deficit. So do you have any things when people are away from home and they're in a land of too many decisions, i.e. the fast food restaurant? What are some of your favorite choices for places, like I said, like Chipotle, Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, Burger King, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, just some example. I mean, really just any fast food place. I think usually a lot of them have grilled chicken options. So that's almost always a good rule of thumb too, if you're gonna, and like, if we backtrack a little bit, before you go, deciding ahead of time, before you're in that environment where you're like smelling the burger and fries, like deciding what you're gonna get ahead of time by looking at the menu, but knowing that when you do look at the menu, looking for something that's grilled chicken based is usually going to be a decent option. So like a Chick-fil-A grilled chicken sandwich, they also have grilled chicken nuggets, they have side salads. Chipotle, I mean, they're like, you're not limited to chicken at that place, and their other options like their pork and their beef, I believe, are fairly similar, like fat and calorie wise as their chicken. So there you're not necessarily limited to grilled chicken. But yeah, and then at Chipotle, like if you build your own burrito bowl, you can, like if you do it on the app, you can choose the portion, like you can choose a little bit of rice, medium amount of rice, like larger portion of rice. So you can really manipulate the other foods so that it makes a little bit more sense in the context of what you would need for that meal.
So this is interesting. I noticed something you said about, you talked about protein first, right? About the grilled chicken options, about the pork, about the beef. Protein first, protein first, protein first. I noticed when you were talking about those options, you didn't plan it around the carbs or the carb fat sources, things like hummus, nuts, and beans, which people think are protein sources, but really are more sources of fat and case carbs.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? That's interesting that you chose protein first. Can you explain why?
Yeah, I mean, well, when it comes to a diet that supports weight loss, or more specifically fat loss, calories and protein are going to be the two biggest deciding factors of that actually happening. So if you think of your calories and then your protein, carbs, and fats, like if you think of the analogy of like rocks in a bucket, like if you want to fill the bucket with rocks, you put the big rocks in first, and then you fill the rest of the bucket with pebbles. So if you use that for calories, protein, carbs, and fats, your big rocks are going to be calories and protein. So you want to think about the protein as the big rock. So you figure out your protein first, put that in the bucket, and then with the rest of the calories you have left, then you would pick your carb and fat sources.
Now, protein, schmotein. We keep talking about the importance of protein, but I think for some of our people out there, especially our actuarial accountant types, they really like numbers. Can you give us, in your experience, obviously you're not a dietitian, you're not working with someone with renal failure, right? We're talking about the general healthy person. In your experience, is there a specific number or range of protein requirement per day that person should shoot for?
Yeah, so typically around 0.5 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day, depending on the person's activity levels, their muscle mass, their body fat. That would then, like if you're on the, let's say you have more muscle, you're more active, you're on the leaner side, you would lean on that higher end, like 1 gram protein per pound of body weight. Whereas if you have less muscle or less active, you would lean on that lower end of half a gram per pound of body weight per day.
So specific numbers, say for like 150-pound person, what would that come out to?
So like if you're going half,
A gram to a gram, yeah, that would be what, like
75 to 150 grams of protein.
75 to 100 grams. Now, here's a question. You tell someone that and they go, Devin, that's too much protein. I'm going to feel full and bloated. Obviously, okay, they really do sound like that. I'm not going to be nice with it. What's your answer when they go, what do you say to those people?
Well, one, when they say I'm going to be full, that's my answer is that's the whole point. And then it's like,
wait, you're telling us that being full while still in a calorie deficit is advantageous for weight loss?
It is.
Wow, I need a drink. Okay, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's typically like people will eat like they start with, like we were talking about, like they start with their carbs and fat sources and then wonder why they're having too many calories and not enough protein. But it's like going back to the big rocks analogy, if you're prioritizing that protein first and then getting full, well, if you don't have as much room for carbs and fats, great, it just makes your calorie deficit easier. Like it's not a bad thing.
Okay, very, very good. Here's another question I have from the public. Can you give us some examples of your favorite protein-rich meals that you like to have? And can you divide them in 2 groups? Meals that you can have when you have time to sit down and meals you have when you're on the go. So let's start with the meals on the go. What are some of your favorite protein sources when you need something quick and on the go? That's not fast food restaurant. You've already covered that.
Yeah.
Non-fast food. What's some examples of that?
On the go, like a protein smoothie. So with that, like protein powder, usually some like frozen fruit and like frozen spinach, maybe a few other things in there.
Wait a second, spinach, does that taste gross?
You can't taste it. The protein powder covers it up. You can't taste
it.
it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so like a protein smoothie. I could go off on a tangent about the smoothies.
Let me tell you something. I love smoothie tangents. Please go. If you get too out of control, I'll stop you. Go.
Well, this kind of goes off on my, like what I was saying before with the planning the protein first. Like I think a lot of people will focus on, they just find all these healthy things to put in their smoothie, like chia seeds, flax seeds, honey, nuts, fresh juice. And then they end up getting so many calories that they end up making this super calorie dense drink, but it kind of defeats the purpose if it's a lot of calories with not a lot of protein. So I think
let's hit on that because that's a very interesting point. What other meals, healthy meals that people eat that you've seen them suffer from that low calorie imposter syndrome where they think something's low calorie, but then in the end it winds up? Are there any examples when they go off the top of your head of other types of meals or other food sources that people think are low calorie, but they turn out not to be?
Yeah, I mean, in the same family of smoothies, like the acai bowls, those are, it's just all.
What's that? Can you explain what that is?
It's just like blended fruit and granola on top and then fruit on top. So it's a lot of carbs, some fats, and not a lot of protein. Like they say that they even advertise like, oh, this has protein added, and it's probably like 20 grams of protein for like 400 or more calories. So you're really not getting that much.
And here I'm sitting there thinking I'm being healthy, I'm having all these antioxidants flowing in me, right?
Yeah.
Right? But I'm just increasing the size of the playing field so the antioxidants don't do what they're normally supposed to do because I've just gained so many calories.
Right.
One of the things, like when you see people smiling when they're eating salad, what's going on with that? What are some things that people do with salad to go to your point that people think that things like hummus and nuts and all those are sources of protein, but really no, they're sources of fat? What are some things you've seen people do with salads in the name of health that turn the salads into calorie-dense nightmares?
Yeah, a lot of the common ones with like, by the time you have the dried fruit, like the craisins, and then the candied nuts, and then some of the Asian salads, like the fried noodles that they have on there, and then the dressing, and then the cheese. So
But
like,
you cheese is not a good protein source compared to say things like chicken and stuff like that.
well, it's higher in fat. It does, cheese has protein, but it's like if you're having all of those other fat sources, it just ends up being, again, making the meal as a whole higher fat and higher calorie without having as much protein as
So if we could take some of these options south of the border, what can you tell me about taco and chili options? Say I want a little Southwestern kind of Mexican, Texas, Tex-Mex kind of flavor to my protein. What are some options you could have for that?
Well, I think the main thing, I mean, there's going to be a difference protein and calorie wise between, let's say on one end of the spectrum, you're using like a pork or a higher fat beef, and then you're putting cheese and sour cream, and then you have the tortillas, and then you have the guac, because people can't live without guac, and it's like that's at one end of the extreme. Or you could have the tortillas and then a leaner source of protein, let's say like a lean beef or a chicken taco or a fish taco, and then let's say you have a small portion of whether you decide you want like the guac, sour cream, and cheese, like much smaller portions, and then loading it up with veggies, like let's say like so some people like to use like a cabbage slaw, or just like chopped lettuce, tomatoes, salsa. So people are like, oh, are tacos good or bad for fat loss? And it's like, well, what kind of taco? What's on your taco? Like looking into like what you're actually putting on it. And
Just so real quick for our non-millennials, just so we know, guac is short for guacamole. All right, just so we all know that. We got chips, salsa, and guac. Guac is guacamole. Thank you, Devon. Please continue.
Yeah, so like, I mean, if you think of, you don't have to like only exist on one end of the extreme of either, like on either extreme of the spectrum, but knowing that there are ways that you can manipulate your favorite foods in order to make it make sense for your calorie and protein needs.
Now, in the beginning, is it always going to be this conscious of an effort? Is this going to be something you have to do for the rest of your life? Is be constantly obsessive about what you're doing, or does this become more kind of like an automatic thing over time? And use yourself and your clients as a specific example.
I think at the beginning, it can definitely take probably a lot more upfront effort than people maybe want to invest. But if you put in the hard work at the beginning and really establish these as habits, just like when you're preparing a recipe, like learning how to think differently, like, okay, I'm going to pick a lean protein source. I'm going to be more picky about my fat sources and make sure that I'm having portions that are smaller so that I'm not exceeding calories. Like if that become, like if you do that, if you practice that over and over again, it just becomes your norm. That's really what makes it easy. So like you have to do the hard part first before it gets to be easy. But if you invest practice in the hard stuff, it gets to feel more automatic in the long run.
And do you have favorite types of protein shakes or protein bars that you tend to go to, or is it you? Or let me ask that question: do you have a favorite type brand? Do you like whey protein versus casein protein? Anything? What do you have to say about like protein shakes and bars?
For my clients, like there are a couple brands that I do like to recommend of bars. Like, I mean, I think the main thing is looking for a bar that has a relatively high protein to calorie ratio. And protein bars really, like you're better off just having like putting like a piece of chicken breast in a baggie and bringing that with you, like if you're really looking for protein. But
what's the ratio you're looking for? Like, for example, if the protein bar has 200 calories, how many grams of protein would you like to see in that protein bar?
Ideally around 20 grams of protein.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your feeling at all the different types of Greek yogurts now and things like that? Do you utilize those a lot?
For clients, if they tolerate dairy, I do recommend Greek yogurt. I typically recommend if someone's in a calorie deficit, I typically recommend the like 0%, and the unflavored, and then having them add something like fruit, like adding whole fruit rather than getting the fruit flavored ones that typically have a lot of added sugar. So it's like, yeah, it adds flavor, but it's extra calories that aren't very filling. Whereas like if they got the plain Greek yogurt and get put on like chopped up strawberries or something like that, that's going to have a lot more fiber and water and be more filling than
You know how I feel about fruits and desserts, so please go ahead. Don't mind my snarling. You know my toes are curling right now, the idea of fruit touching yogurt, but everyone's not me, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's looking for something that's more filling for the same amount of calories, get the plain unflavored yogurt with chopped fresh fruit is going to be that, relative to if you got like the flavored Greek yogurt that has a lot of added sugar. And I know they have other variations that's like they have it sweetened with like stevia and other like low calorie all natural sweeteners, and so it's like you really just have to look at the label and see what's in it, and just know that if it does have a lot of added sugar, it's just not going to be quite as filling as something like whole fruit would be.
Now, question is, what turned you on about all this? What's turned you on to all this? What has allowed you to, say, go to the other side of these decisions? Like a lot of people you'll meet, this is a whole new world for them, right? I'm not talking about like Aladdin on the carpet here, right, from the Disney movie. I'm talking about like they hear all this and it's not what they're used to. What turned you over to the workout, exercise, protein, weightlifting side? What was it that really sold you on this?
Like more like the protein and lifting weights specifically?
This whole world that you now live in, you know, the idea of protein first, weights, you know, lifting weights, taking care of your body, controlling calories. What is it that motivated you to make that shift?
I mean, I would say,
or were you born like just eating steak? I don't know. I mean, like, wah, give me meat. Like, what was the?
I would say it's probably there's such a long chain of events to explain in a succinct way, but I would say really like having a I don't know, journey is probably the wrong word to use, but it just like going through a process of wanting to be like maintain a healthy weight to support my performance in the gym. I mean, I personally am a very lazy person. Like I'm the person that just wanted to like sit on the sidelines in gym class. Mm-hmm. But when I have like a structured workout to follow that I can do at a specific time, and I know exactly what I have to do is listed out, and I know that I've done the same thing last week, and the only important thing is that I do just a little bit better than I did the week before. It gives me a little bit more structure in terms of like knowing exactly what I have to do, and relative to other ways of getting in that people can get in physical activity that don't have that same structure.
So here's a question. What allowed you to get over the I don't want to get bulky hump? That oftentimes is a rejection against lifting weights and eating protein. So specifically as a female, what was it that allowed you to get over that mental block? If you ever had it, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that that also is probably a multifaceted answer, but I would say probably just realizing that being really skinny for me and my body structure just didn't make sense. And I was like, okay, if I'm not going to be a small person, I might as well be a muscular person if I want to like look and feel healthy and fit, if that makes sense.
Well, let me unpack that a little, because that's pretty important. You mean to tell me you, through the right exercise program and through the quote unquote right diet, cannot change somebody's body structure? Is that what you're telling me?
Right.
So you're telling me that if horse jockeys just drank more milk, they wouldn't have been 4'11", they would have been 6'2". That wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And you're telling me that if LeBron James had or had not bounced the basketball, you're telling me he would have still wound up as tall as he is.
Correct.
So you're telling me that if I go on a diet and just do Pilates all day long, I probably won't wind up looking like a professional dancer.
Unfortunately, no.
My God. How dare you? So what you're saying is all my wildest dreams just cannot just simply come true because I want them to come true. That's what you're saying. That people have body types and that are you telling me that it's better to make the most of the body type you have instead of hating the body type that you do have? Is that what you're telling me, Devon?
That's a huge part of it. Yeah. That's a big part of it. And then also there's the other side of it that like, it's actually really, really hard to get bulky. Like you can try to build muscle for years and years and years, and you're just simply not going to get bulky. So, and that's actually like for people that want to lose weight, people that want to lose body fat, people that want to look smaller, actually building muscle and trying to get bigger, like in a muscular sense, is actually something that's going to have a huge role in them actually being able to probably either look the way they want to look, or have their clothes fit the way that they want their clothes to fit, or
why is that? That's very interesting. Why is that? How did someone's greatest fear become their greatest asset? How does that work? How does putting on more muscle help you get the look that you want, more the look that you want?
I mean,
let me give you an example. Like for me, because that's a very broad question. Multifaceted, I think, is the word of this interview today. I don't want to get too multifaceted. If a woman, say, can't change the size of her waist because it's just the size of her waist, she can't change the size of her hip without a belt sander. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But she puts a little muscle on her chest and shoulders. What's that going to do to her aesthetic look?
I mean, it can give the illusion of a smaller waist, and you can actually make your waist smaller. Like by building muscle and losing body fat, the waist is not a muscly area. So when you, let's say someone stayed at the same weight, but they built muscle, the waist is going to get smaller. And that's
as small as it can possibly get, I would imagine, right?
Right.
Now you're dealing with, say, for example, a young woman. Let's just say a mother is watching this, or a father, any parent, any guardian, right? Let's say this video lasts 500 years, which I hope it does. And robots have now been gotten to the point where they're taking care of our children. And someone's robot this is getting out of control, but whatever. What would your advice be to a younger Devon Peterson if she came to you and said, Devon, I really like the way you look. I really like your advice. What's your advice for me to get started in this world of muscle and protein and working out and accepting the body I have and making the most of it? What would be your advice? What are your big rocks to sum this up, right? Let's sum this whole painful experience for me up where I'm not speaking. Although I seem to be doing a lot of speaking. What would be the big rocks to really get her going onto that roadmap to success?
Yeah. So with that, I would say, like with the focus on protein, like going back to those numbers I mentioned before, like half a gram to 1 gram per pound of body weight per day. So plan, and then going back to minimizing decision fatigue, figuring out your portions, knowing what you're going to need at each meal, and figuring out those portions of protein that you like. So it's really something that you can just automate in your day, in your food intake. And then with lifting weights, I mean, typically people recommend like focus mostly on compound movements, like bigger movements, squat, lunge, deadlift, chest press, row. But I think that isolation work definitely has a lot of value too. You just don't want to spend all day doing like abs and arms. You want to make sure you're working like your legs, your chest, your back.
You find isolation work is easier for beginners to learn? Is that what the value of it is?
That's a big part of it. I think too, it allows you to load up the muscle without needing as much skill as let's say like a deadlift would require. So like you can sit on a seated hamstring curl and you can really add a lot more weight. And again, there's not as much skill required to load that muscle, which is necessary to actually build the muscle.
Now, here's on the other end of the spectrum, you got someone in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s. I'm only asking this because I have insider knowledge. I've seen you be successful with these people in the past, right? I've actually gone up to clients of yours in the gym and not knowing they were clients of yours, asked them, who the hell taught you that? Because you're the only normal person I've ever seen do that exercise right. They're like, oh, well, I trained with Devon. What's your advice to them? Is it too late? Maybe should be the question. Is it ever too late?
No. I mean, my advice really wouldn't be dramatically different. Like with the protein and the like lifting, big movements are important, big muscle groups, but also isolation work has value for, again, not needing that as much skill and really being able to load up those muscle groups. And especially with the older people, like the 40s, 50s, 60s, like a lot of them have been like sitting at a computer for the past 30 years, like at work. So like their posture might not be immediately ready to just go into some of those bigger movements safely. So that's another reason why isolation work can be beneficial with that, with like those types of people as well.
Okay, so we have 1 minute left. I want to ask you in this last minute, is there anything you think, don't get too multifaceted, pick one facet and stick with it. Is there any one thing, if you had a minute to talk to the entire world of people who want to lose weight and get in shape, what would be one thing that you would really want to make sure they know from this video? From this video, I don't want you to go on the broad thing of all the things. Like, because already out of this, the decision fatigue thing is huge for me, right? But what is one thing you really want to get out there?
I think it's like knowing that it's a combination of making it as enjoyable as possible. Like I said, finding those foods that you like, but then also knowing that there's another piece of it that it is more about automation and again, eliminating decision fatigue. So you have to set yourself up to be consistent, but I think having like a healthy balance of those two things, if you can keep both of those things going at the same time, I think then that's going to be really helpful for someone's success.
All right. Well, I know that I got a lot out of this. Already, I got all my notes right here. God help us all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow and rant and rake about something else. I don't know. That was huge. So that was a huge thing in understanding that you do not have to massively change the way you eat. You got to be a little more conscious about what exactly it is you're doing. I thought it was fantastic. So on behalf of myself and Devon Peterson, Devon's about to hit the stop the record button. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I thank Devon for her expertise. And we will come back to this, I guess, in a couple more weeks and go from there. So that's it, Devon. Anything else you want to say?
That's it. People can put comments below.
Oh, where do people, it says less than a minute. Besides comments, where do people reach Devon? Where do they find Devon Peterson? Let's get that in there real quick. Go.
Instagram, coach _Devon. And we'll put my YouTube video link in the description.
Okay, we'll put that in the description if you need to hear more of what Devon has to say. So I hope everyone's happy with the fact that I was able to minimize my amount of interjection. And that's it, Devon. Why don't you stop, hit record, and then we'll close this thing out.